All right, we are live. Okay, well, good morning, everybody, and thanks for coming along today. This will be a live half-hour session, a Q&A with Dr. Kaye Frankcom, and will also end up being a permanent record on our YouTube channel as well as our private practice community. Now, just give me a moment. Getting a little bit of feedback on my systems here. So in the Core Plus private practice, Dr. Kaye Frankcom has been gracious enough to put forward 3 Tutes sessions that dealt with a number of things which have culminated in a Q&A session today, which we're calling Just Tell Me What to Do, which I'll get your views as to why that's a really significant question, Kaye. Well, it's not really a question, it's more a direction. Please help me. So for those who haven't heard of Dr. Kaye Frankcom, Dr. Kaye Frankcom has a 30-plus year experience in psychology practice management, has worked in and around the sector and built and recently sold a very large psychology practice in Williamstown. It was almost 17 years, Kaye, that you're involved with that practice. Kaye is also a lead author in a book called Fit to Practice. That's the short title. The longer title is Everything You Wanted to Know About Starting Your Own Psychology Practice in Australia, but We're Afraid to Ask. So that's an interesting subject or subheading for the book, Kaye, which I'd love to hear a little bit more about. And Kaye also coaches and mentors practice owners, and has developed an incredible amount of resources on her website, which is kayefrankcom.com, where there are resources and workbooks and templates that cover a whole bunch of stuff that have been the subject in part of the 3 sessions that Kaye has done for the Core Plus Practice Happy community, covering all types of things around key performance indicators, for example, what digital transformation means for a modern psychology health practice, developing system of symptoms and a system of systems, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So welcome, Kaye. Thanks for coming along again today for this Q&A session.
Pleasure, Yianni. Great to be with everyone.
So I guess kicking off that idea of just tell me what to do, that's been something that you've experienced a lot within your coaching and mentoring career, and also particularly through this pandemic. Why did you feel that was a really good heading to put towards this particular Q&A session?
I think it's because, one, it's been said to me many times, just tell me what to do in various ways, sometimes indirectly, but sometimes quite honestly, and I just don't know what to do sort of statement by practice directors. And I think in this volatile environment we're in now, where a lot of change is occurring, there's a lot of complexity, there's compliance, regulations, there's government, big money involved, not just through Medicare and the NDIS, but also pouring money into mental health in general and a much bigger system than we've had in the past. I think a lot of people just balk at it and just think, just tell me what I need to do. Now, the difficulty with telling them what to do is then they say yes, but. So a lot of the time it's a journey. It's a journey through the process of breaking it down so that it's not quite as formidable as it looks, and helping people to see that actually you can make small changes over a period of time that will actually revolutionise your practice and deliver to your community. And that's really what government expects of us, Yianni, when we are in the position we're in, particularly in psychology, where we're getting funding from third parties like Medicare and the NDIS. We have a social licence, and there is an expectation that we fulfil that social licence, which is to provide access to our services and to be responsive to client needs.
Yeah, it to me, it sort of evokes also the idea that but how I relate to it is just tell me what to do. It's kind of, you can be in a position sometimes where you've just got so much going on in your world that you just want to find the fastest and most efficient way to be, getting anything done. And doesn't necessarily mean that everything's going great in your life. Like you could have your own challenges in business. Business might be going well on the one hand, but not so good on the other hand. There's a lot of dimensions to a modern business, let alone a healthcare business as well. Do you think that's part of that kind of call to action of just tell me what to do?
Yes, and I think it really stems from the difficulty that so many of us are spending a lot of time in our business, working by the hour for an hourly rate, and we have no time, at least that's the perception, to actually get outside of the business and look at what we're doing. So we don't think like a psychologist when we're looking at our business. We don't think like a business owner when we're looking at our practice. So what I'm trying to say is we need to bring both elements together. We have so much knowledge and understanding of relationships, how organisations operate, how people can be helped and influenced, but we don't often bring it to bear in our business, looking at our business and bring our business into that space so that we can actually operate in a way that is effective. So the business of just sort of keeping on the tools, as I say, and not being prepared to stand back is always going to mean that you have no leverage. In other words, you don't have any way of making money when you're not seeing clients day in, day out, which is probably a recipe for burnout. And secondly, you're not really thinking about what is satisfying to you and how you can meet the needs of the community you want to serve.
Yeah, I recall in session number 1, when your first Tute, you talked about emerging from the pandemic and kind of dealing with that. So what would you call it? Resistance, the resistance to change that people have. There was sort of pre-pandemic healthcare, and now there's sort of post-pandemic, well, hopefully soon post-pandemic healthcare. So is that just a normal behavioural trait? There's just resistance to change. Is that just a general observation, or is it something that's a little bit more specific to healthcare?
It's probably normal. When for sure, most of us might say we want change or need change or like change, but actually overall we probably don't like it for ourselves. So as I often say to people, it's like what we say to clients: please change the problem, but don't change me. That's what clients often come to therapy.
It's a really interesting way of saying it.
Yes, and I think we're the same in our businesses. Could you change the problem, but don't ask me to change? Well, that isn't possible because it's your business. And in most cases, it's a small business. And in 50% of the people who in private practice, it's a solo practitioner business. So if you can't change yourself, then it's going to be a problem.
Yeah, that's that statistic blows me away. I mentioned to you just before we were getting ready to go live, what we're seeing this year in particular is that there are a number of solo practitioners who are actually closing down their businesses. They're shutting down, and that was 2 years ago. For example, in 2020, there was a clear emerging trend in startups in the allied health sector, and psychology was one of the leading growth startup sectors there at that point in time. So that's definitely an indicator that business is challenging. It's a different sort of skill set. I know you talk a lot about think like a psychologist, act like a business owner, which I think is a really great way of contextualizing that difference between the clinical expertise that somebody has versus the skills needed to actually operate a business. And so I wanted to ask you about something that you touched on in Tute number 1. You drew some references between what that resistance and what change does, and I can't quite remember the person that you're referencing from a TED talk, but there are links in that particular Tute session. Sorry, what was the name?
Jason Clark,
and that was sort of talking about status quo versus letting things go versus going for it. Do you mind just giving us a quick summary as to what that was about?
Well, it basically is saying you need to evaluate really what you've got and decide what you want to hang on to, and because it's working for you, what has never worked for you that you may need to let go of, and what you want to engage with and take the risk. So there are some things that will never change that are quite, just part of our practice, and we can't really change them. So compliance with Medicare and compliance with AHPRA and so forth, But there are other things that we can actually change. And I think it's interesting your statistics about people leaving, because I think this is something that's being foreshadowed, that we may have a group of psychologists leaving a profession that in the past was always, once a psychologist, always a psychologist. And it could be up to 20%, maybe even 30%. And I wonder whether this is partly about us moving through a process that the GPs have moved through, which is from solo practitioners to some other business model, which in their case has been, there's a range of different business models that GPs have, but most of the time, in fact, only 5% of their GPs who are currently working are in solo practices. It's just not viable. And so I'm wondering whether the people who have closed down their practices, whether they're also wondering about joining up with someone else, finding some way to share expenses, to do something that what I call a hybrid, maybe not necessarily working for themselves anymore, working perhaps for someone else, or working for themselves but in a collegial environment. There's a lot of different options and possibilities. But most of it takes effort, and it means you have to let go of some of the things that you thought were not for you, and you have to have a futurist mindset.
Yeah, and I know you talk a lot about that in the time I've gotten to know you, Kaye. So there's a little bit more information in that Tute session number 1, which is in the coreplus private practice, a practice happy community. And I guess one of the other points that you made there as well, at a very high level, was the differences in that sort of pre-pandemic response versus the post-pandemic response. And there were a number of things you talked about where you sort of summarise some things around how the industry was relating to data and digital tools pre-pandemic versus post, how it related to telehealth pre and post, some other insights there. Do you want to just give us a couple of headlines there of some of the things that you've observed in that pre and post-pandemic version of mental health?
Well, I think psychology and to some degree social work and mental health social work and mental health OTs would all say that, you know, they practiced in the way that was expected of them, which is in a bricks and mortar environment, with no expectation really of doing telehealth because there was no funding for it unless you're in a regional remote environment or providing services to that group. But the fact of the matter that telehealth has been known to be efficacious, equally effective in most cases. Obviously, there are certain people who do not respond very well to it. But in terms of the clients tend to be happy with it, especially the access element. And now most practices are using telehealth where somebody cannot attend for whatever reason so that they don't cancel their appointment, so that they continue with their treatment plan at the same frequency as was devised with their psychologist. And I think in some ways what you'd have to say about the whole situation pre-pandemic is that, well, perhaps we were getting in our own way by telling ourselves it can't be funded, so therefore it can't be done. And I think when Medicare within 2 weeks had telehealth items available to all of us, and then starting off as a bulk billing option, then turning it into being able to charge a fee and a gap, it just shows you that if Medicare can pivot, so can we, and we did. But I think it's also saying what happened for us that we weren't able to think more broadly about what else we can do, how we can actually use our capacities in a broader way and operate in a more responsive way to our clients. Even just things like being able to have all of your administration automatized, and optimizing what you can do with fillable forms and all of those sorts of things. How do you make it easy for the client to make the journey into your care and out again? These are all things that we were not really paying attention to. We just, I think, thought that perhaps the demand would go on forever. And frankly, I think what's happening at the moment is the tsunami of demand is still there, but it's not as pressing. And government, of course, has established other options because we've got these wait lists in many of the practices. So again, there's this sense from government, well, what's happened that we can't have people seeing psychologists? And the answer is it's a problem with workforce. That's true. But I guess it's also that they've said, well, we're going to have to do something else. So they've got the Head to Health hubs, they've got the various initiatives that are coming out of the Commonwealth, and also as a result of the Victorian Royal Commission.
But we also there were some other observations that you made in that Tute series, which we've observed across our network as well, and that is that things were able to continue, and so there's an element there of any naysayers or perhaps people who thought that change isn't doable actually found that you can, and the sky doesn't fall down. We're able to actually adapt with the right impetus, and there are some real positives out of that because we effectively had a large social experiment going on where we observed what healthcare would look like asynchronously and remotely as well. So they're really interesting observations that showed that there was continuity and we're able to actually keep continuity. And I guess that reinforces the whole idea of the systems side, which is what you concentrated on with your second Tute. You're highlighting that the current challenges with private practice were inadequate systems. Why did you say that, and what were the key things that you focused on there in that particular Tute?
I think the main thing I would say, first of all, is that inadequate systems include problems with clinical governance primarily. And what that refers to is really whether we are providing quality care and whether it's safe and accountable. So we tend to struggle with measuring what we're doing. So there's been a lot of resistance really to outcome measurement, even though the government, every report that has been written in the last 5 years has had outcome measurement front and centre. We should have outcome measurements in mental health. Now, I know there's a lot of debate about what and when and who's the, what should be used and all the rest of it. But the fact of the matter is that this is required. And also you need to have policies and procedures in place so that people understand how your service operates. And then that has to then be made transparent and transition to the client therapist relationship. So it's very clear to the client what your working formulation is, what you think is happening for them, that you've made a proper assessment, and that you've got a treatment plan that you'd like to share with them, and you have some estimate of how much time it'll take before they will see change. Now, this is all trying to then take psychology and therapy into the realm of collaborating with our clients, not saying we've got this information, we know what you need, we know what's best for you, leave it to us. This is not workable anymore. And so we need to have systems that really support that, and we need to know things about what's going on in our practice. So how many clients is optimal for you to see per week? How many current active clients do you have? What's your projected budget? What's your profit goal? How would you know if you're effective? Is everyone you are seeing in active treatment, or have you achieved all you can with some clients but can't seem to discharge them? These are all part of inadequate systems. Obviously, the relational systems as well as practice systems and clinical systems. So these all fit under that inadequate system story.
There were also a really sort of interesting statement that you presented around 3 key areas of clinical standards. You talked about business standards and you talked about leverage as well. And I wonder if you could summarize, I guess, the answer to the question in each of those around what should a practice owner be able to answer without looking them up. I mean, it's one thing to have the metrics there in a dashboard and being able to source, but maybe you can give us one metric for each of those things: the clinical standard, the business standard, and the leverage that you described in Tute 2.
Yes. So if you don't know what's going on in your practice, then it's very hard to answer questions about it. So the only way you can know is to use the reporting functions in your practice management system and also in your outcome measurement systems. Unfortunately, these things are often separate now. We don't have one dashboard. And one day we will. We'll have a system of systems, Yianni. If you and I, we might be dead by the time this happens, but I hope not. Or in my case, it might be me quicker than you. But, I really feel very strongly that we just need to have that capacity to look at our practices. And so for me, it's always an interesting question. The first question I usually ask somebody I'm coaching is, do you have a business plan? What's your vision and objectives? How would you know if you've reached them? What's your projected budget? How do you develop a projected budget? How many clients can you see per week? What's your optimal number? And are you at that? How many active clients have you got? All those things I was just speaking about before. So I think it's really about looking at what we know is going on in our practice and being able to look at our reports over time and be clear about whether we're actually getting anywhere or not. And leverage is quite hard to develop in a solo practice because, of course, you don't have other people earning money in your practice while you give them referrals, for example, which is a pretty common model. But there are ways of developing leverage around thinking about how much time and effort do I want to spend with clients of a certain type, of a certain payment type. How do I want to shape my practice? How many new clients do I want to see on a monthly basis? There are many people practicing who would not have had a new client for 2.5, 3 years. And I'm not saying it's wrong or right. I'm just saying why. And can you explain to yourself and to a supervisor or coach how that is actually supporting that client and whether or not it's actually in your interest and whether you are actually making a change, actively assisting this person, and are they able to self-manage? Is it possible to stop care for a period of time and have a break and see how it goes? Overall, having clients permanently dependent on us is unlikely to be in their best interests.
That's really, really good overview, and I know you've gone into a little bit more detail on the Tute, and there's certainly a lot of resources that you offer as well, Kaye, on your own website there for people to actually get you to come in and assist with those things, because it's one of those things that does need a support system in place over a longer period of time. So that I really love the fact that you talk about roadmaps, for example, in your coaching and mentoring content. Roadmaps are something that in technical development we live by them, where we think they're a really important visual aid in actually setting out the waypoints that are needed to get you from where you are today to where you envisage you need to be in the future. And our obsession is about how we design a better customer experience, and so we look at it through the eyes of digital touch points and how that journey supports the goals that our customers or our subscribers need to be able to achieve in order to overcome some underlying problems that they're dealing with in a business context. I've kind of realized over the years that sounds quite similar to how a therapist would approach trying to figure out how to unpack some of the potential problems or issues, or even understand the goals of a patient, and then sort of set up a program. So I kind of get a sense that there's a real strong mapping or correlation between just how businesses operate generally within that clinical engagement, but then you sort of apply it to yourself as a business owner, and it gets a little bit trickier, doesn't it? It's kind of it's easy to think about setting goals and helping clients get from point A to point B, but then when it comes to actually running your own business, you kind of don't walk the same talk. Is that part of the challenge of actually emerging post-pandemic, on actually saying, look, we did survive through that period of time. We were able to adapt. Some things have come out more positive. In other cases, we've also got, some streamlining problems. There might be some recruiting problems. There's some, need to work on systems. But we can do this, right? And with the help of somebody who can guide you through it, just like you would expect your client to have that support system in place. Is that the answer for a lot of practice owners now, is to actually be able to build those support systems around themselves?
Well, I think as you said at the start, if you keep on doing the same as what you've always done, then you'll get the same result. So to have somebody outside to look at what you're doing, we spend so much money as mental health clinicians on CPD around different types of therapies and interventions and training in schema therapy and EMDR and CBT and ACT and so on and so forth. But when you say to people, how much CPD do you put into the business itself? Where do you go for an objective view of what you're doing to share with somebody confidentially what's going on for you, to be able to admit what you don't know, hence the just tell me what to do, but also to talk about how you can do better with that so that there's less stress, because a lot of the stress really comes from the business. So if you're a solo practitioner working a couple of days a week, you're going to have another day of admin to do if you're not paying somebody to do that for you. And for many, that is quite a stressful thing. They're not, they don't want to be doing that. They find that, it's not their cup of tea. And I guess I say that's fine, but what are you going to do about it? If you just leave it like that, it'll continue to be a thorn in your side. So I think it's about recognising that there are certain economies of scale that we need to think about. There's certain business principles we need to be aware of, business standards, business jargon. And I guess if it doesn't feel comfortable with you, then you need to be talking to somebody who can help you get comfortable. Even being in a network where, even a business network locally to wherever you are practicing or living can actually help to talk to people outside of psychology and to get some pointers from them. These are all possibilities for us to be thinking outside the square. I mean, psychologists in the past, for example, would have been very reluctant to open up the client portal, to let a client make their own appointments. I think that we've seen a shift in that. But again, we were the barrier. We didn't want to relinquish control. And I guess I said, that's fine. I don't have any problem that you may wish to control that for various reasons, but you need to then, I guess, hold the blowtorch to that and say, does it stand up in the face of what I'm scared of or worried about? It may not. So you certainly see people who say, I allow people to make their own appointments once they've made a first appointment. Do you want to do intake calls? I always say, if you stop picking up the phone, life will be a lot easier. Because the phone is such a time waster, of course,
Yep.
Even though we all love phones. But, I think it's just being able to have a look at things that seem to have been dyed in the wool. You couldn't possibly let go of that. You couldn't possibly let anybody do that, and recognise that it's really about looking at a budget and what you've got to spend on that and what you could be doing with your time, given what your charge out rate when you're getting somebody to help you with those things on a regular basis.
That's a really good point, because I think you mentioned earlier that for every 2 days of clinical practice for a sole proprietor, there's a day of admin. So if you calculate those 8 hours or so, or 6 hours at your charge out rate, that is the opportunity cost of doing admin. So where you have those automations and what have you, there's a great case for efficiency, let alone getting time back to do some other things that make you feel better as a person in terms of relaxing or hobbies, interests, and what have you. Your third tute was all about digitalization. I should be able to say that, shouldn't I? Yep. And you talked about digital transformation, and you had a really good context which resonated with me, and that is that the whole digital transformation with healthcare is not necessarily healthcare plus a bit of digital. Do you want to talk us through what you meant by that?
Yes, I think people said, oh, well, I'm using templates and I'm sending out invoices and people get SMSs and I make my Medicare claims online and so I think I'm pretty digital savvy. And I guess I'd say this is the bottom end of the scope. Really what we want to do is look at how do we actually transform, not digitally, but in general, that we actually go forward. And again, it's back to this future-focused approach where we look at our total system and think about what would happen if we actually had one password and one login to all of the systems that we use, all of the databases we use. There are opportunities to do this now, but it's not freely known and not freely used in the allied health sector. But imagine if you could walk in and log in to one through one portal and all of your databases were lined up. I guess the other question is, are those databases going to servers? Are they going to the cloud? How hackable are they? I've certainly been involved with organisations that have been hacked and it's not a pleasant experience. So I think it is about thinking about how am I set up for the future, not just today, not next week, not while we're waiting to see what the Medicare review has in it and so on, all the things that are still to come our way in terms of reforms. But actually when I look, and review my practice in general, both the automated and digital parts of it and also the way in which I practice, how am I able to streamline that more? How many clicks do I want to use to have to use any part of that system. Am I using digital notes, and am I writing my notes onto a device that then will upload automatically to my private practice, to my practice management system? All of these things are really critical, and people say, oh, I couldn't possibly move away from hard copy notes. Well, then get ready for the idea that when you've filled a couple of hundred archive boxes full of client notes over 20 years of practice, that you are then going to have to pay somebody to chuck them up in the cloud for you while you wait for the 7 years or more to go by before you can destroy them. So, I think we've just got to look forward and go, this is not sustainable what I'm doing right now. It might be familiar, but it's not sustainable.
So a couple of really good summary notes there from the 3-part tutorial series that Kaye, you've been very good at putting together for our community here at coreplus, so very much appreciated. For those who are watching on YouTube, you won't have access to those tutorials at this point in time. They're available within a private community group around the coreplus platform called the Practice Happy Community. And so you can gain access to those 3 Tute videos from Kaye. And to get in touch with Kaye to help answer the call to action. Kaye walks the talk, so she's not taking too many phone calls. She's got automated, streamlined system of systems in place, and Kaye will tell you exactly what to do in achieving your goals within business. And Kaye's content on her website, kayefrankcom.com, is incredible. We'll put some links in the show notes for this particular live stream as well. And Kaye, once again, on behalf of the Practice Happy community and everybody at coreplus, really appreciate you putting some time in to help grow our practice community and support business owners with the various challenges that somebody like yourself knows all too well, having been in your own practice for a very long time and dealing with all the, the highs and lows that business life presents us, as we all know too well. So thank you once again, Kaye.
Thanks, Yianni. Just one more thing to say, which is psychology is a great profession. We need good people to stay. Get help. Don't quit just because it seems too much. There is somebody out there who can help you with this. It may not be me, but there are other supports. So stick with it and hope to see you around soon.
Terrific. Thanks, Kaye.